Hello and welcome to Unstress Health. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Well, today we explore the subject of cancer, but from a very, very unique perspective. Now, cancer affects something like 500 million people globally. About 10 million people a year die from cancer. It's very unlikely that anyone listening to this doesn't know someone within 1 degree of separation from themselves, if not themselves, who hasn't had it. So cancer is a huge and growing problem, and literally billions of dollars have been spent looking for the magic bullet, looking for the cure for cancer. And so much of the attention in cancer research has been around cancer as a mutation of gene production, of genes in general. And I would have to say, if the evidence is anything to go by, and so much of this research has been focused on that model, that something is seriously wrong if we are indeed practicing evidence-based medicine. Well, my guest today challenges that. My guest is William Supple Jr. Now, William has got a PhD in neuroscience, so he has certainly understands the science, and arguably, because he is not directly involved in cancer research, he may well approach this, or he has, as you will hear, approached this from a very open-minded perspective, driven by his own personal experience, which is often the way that medical practitioners or people in general have an epiphany. He's the author of a book called Cancer is a Parasite. And he's also the author of another book coming up in June called The Sunlight Solution, and we'll definitely be getting him back for that. But in his work, Bill explores provocative ideas about cancer biology and repurposed drugs, medications, and the role of vitamin D in chronic disease. So today we examine the science behind his hypotheses about cancer as a parasite. Now, I must admit, when I first got suggested to talk to William, it piqued my interest as to what he actually meant by that. And he defines that very carefully and comes up with some truly shocking moments, and very empowering moments too. And here we are again talking about repurposed drugs. Now, to any regular listener of this podcast, you will know that the two words business model seem to go a long way to explain how our world works in general and how our health system works in particular. It's a great business model, just not a very good health model. And repurposed drugs have very little appeal to researchers and public health authorities, ironically, because, guess what? Some of them are a little bit too effective, and that's not good for the business model. Well, today we explore one of those drugs, and I think you will be truly shocked and surprised, and I hope empowered by what we cover here today. I hope you enjoy this conversation I have with William Supple. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks, Ron. Great to be here.
Now, Bill, you've written a very interesting book with a very compelling title, Cancer is a Parasite, and you offer a different framework of an understanding of cancer. So what initially made you question that traditional genetic mutation model of cancer?
Well, I mean, first off, I'm here with good news today. There appear to be legitimate cures for a number of different types of cancer in the form of antiparasitic drugs, and my book is about fenbendazole in particular. So I got into this kind of as a happy accident. So my mother-in-law was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer back in 2021. And she, at the time, she was 83 and had, went in for a bowel obstruction, and they did some imaging and found that she basically had cancer everywhere. Lungs, liver, bones, kidneys, basically too many places to count. And at 83, she had decided she didn't want to go through chemotherapy. So she was released home to hospice. I mean, she was so bad that they actually received last rites in the hospital because she wasn't sure she would make the trip home, which was about 5 miles. So she was that bad. So ironically, the morning after we got that news, I was just going through what I typically read, and I just happened to be looking at an article on vitamin D of all things, and I was reading a specific article about how bacteria causes stomach cancer, and in the comments there was a comment that said, "Look at fenbendazole; it cured my prostate cancer." And that started to where we are today. That kind of lit a match to an interest. So I started to look at the research, and I found a few case reports, but the preclinical research on fenbendazole was pretty compelling that it's worth a shot, especially for someone who's not going to do anything else. So I went down to, it's over the counter. It's an animal antiparasitic drug. I went down to, in the States, in Vermont, we have what's known as Tractor Supply, and it's basically an animal feed type store. So I went down and got a package of it, and I tried it myself. It didn't kill me. And I sent a pack it's about, $8. So I sent it back to my wife, who was with her mother down in Florida, and she tried it. We figured 50% genetic match. We didn't want to make a sick person sicker. So my wife took it, no reaction. So we presented the idea that maybe my mother-in-law should try fenbendazole to see what happens. She had nothing to lose, and it was basically a Hail Mary. Well, her husband, we got a bunch of it on Amazon. For about $50, you can get about a 6-month supply. So we bought it on Amazon, and he started mixing it in her daily yogurt. She was kind of out of it. Whether she realized she was getting it or not, all the kids agreed that she should do it, and her husband and she did as well. So in about 2 to 3 weeks, she started to perk up. And her appearance, activity, appetite, all greatly rebounded from where she was, which was basically moribund. And she felt well enough to dismiss hospice. And after about a month, she felt well enough to go back to the oncologist who had dismissed her, given up on her for dead. So she was surprised. He was surprised to see her. So they did some testing, and her blood tumor marker for breast cancer, which is CA2729, went from 316 down to 131. So we knew something was happening. The only thing she had gotten was fenbendazole. So, obviously he was amazed, and he said, "Continue to do what you're doing." So she continued to do what she was doing, and after about 6 months, her blood tumor markers were normal. She was up and around. She started riding her bike at 3 to 4 months. And, she's getting ready to celebrate her 88th birthday. So if I didn't actually see that, I wouldn't have believed it. It was just a remarkable turnaround, and not one single side effect. So it was as if, it was a true miracle happening right in front of us. So she kind of became an urban legend in her little town. So everyone wanted to know, how did she do it? How come she's still here? How did she survive metastatic breast cancer? So, it's like anything, word of mouth travels fast. And my wife and I would tell people what happened, but you end up telling the same story dozens of times. It gets tedious. So we determined that we should have some sort of a vehicle to get her story out there. So what I did is I started a Substack, which is a online publication here in the States that has a lot of alternative medical stuff in it. So it's actually a nice service. So I started that Substack called fenbendazole.substack.com. And I did it under the pseudonym BenFen because I'm not an oncologist and I'm not a MD, I'm a PhD. And I felt that the the message was what mattered, not the messenger. So I did it anonymously. So I published her case report. So I had all of her information, and it was about a year out from her initial diagnosis, and she was happy as a clam. So I published that, and then what started to happen were simultaneously other people were both motivated to try to self-treat their own cancers, or were currently self-treating with fenbendazole, and they said it worked for me too. So it kind of became this online gathering place where people who were self-treating with fenbendazole could tell their story. So I did that for a couple of years, and was publishing detailed case reports as best that we could. People would give us information, again, as best they could. They had just come through a hellish experience, and they weren't necessarily trying to record all the information for publication, but they had pretty good records. So the common feature, the power in the case reports, was that everybody did something different. The control was the lack of control. It was so haphazard that the only thing that was common in all the case reports, you'll see them in the book, was the presence or absence of fenbendazole. So it didn't really matter what type of solid tumor cancer they had. It didn't really matter how much they took, as long as they were sure that they had absorbed it. And it didn't really matter how often they took it. So it's a really interesting product, where it seems to be like a primary poison for cancer cells. And the interesting thing is that, again, it's an antiparasitic used for animals primarily, but there are analogs in humans as well that are basically the same drug, but it's approved for humans, so human use. So it's going to be a lot more expensive, obviously, but the pharmacological scaffold is the same. So whether you use mebendazole, albendazole, fenben, oxyfendazole, thibendazole, it's all kind of the same stuff. So, so I forget where I was going with that.
Well, hang on there, Bill, because where you have got up to is quite extraordinary. There's so much here to unpack about a cheap, repurposed drug. I mean, the alarm bells are going off in the cancer industry right there, because we hear so many breakthroughs of wonderful new drugs that are phenomenally expensive. Right. And yet we still have an epidemic of cancers. It's interesting because so much disease, there are two schools that I've been aware of, and you've introduced another one, the mutation model of gene mutation. And that's been the focus of literally billions of dollars worth of research, right, and literally billions or trillions of dollars worth of sales. The fact that cancer is a genetic mutation model of cancer, that's one thing. I think a lot of people look at cancer as a metabolic disease, an energy thing. But here you are introducing a different model. What do you think, and your background, it will come, well, actually, it might be interesting to just get a little bit of your background there first, in terms of, you've got a PhD. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Right. So I'm trained as a neuroscientist. So I graduated from Dartmouth in 1986, and I studied brainstem mechanisms of behavior, broadly defined, specifically learning and memory.
Right.
So I used, I used, various neuroanatomical, behavioral, and electrophysiological methods to basically record how neurons learned and remembered things. And living, behaving animals. So that's my background is systems neurobiology, looking for where the stuff of learning and memory is stored and how that might be expressed in behavior. So I actually found one of the engrams in 1986, and we published a paper in Science that found the engram for what's known as long-term habituation in the midline cerebellar vermis. So that was kind of my claim to fame way back when.
Okay, but I guess the point in just giving us that little bit of background is you've got a PhD in neuroscience, so you will have a grasp of, I think this is an understatement, and I say it with all due respect, you've got a good grasp of science and the scientific model. And yet, perhaps one could argue that not being an oncologist, not being locked into the gene mutation model, not being connected with research or requiring research funding, you approach this with an open professional mind. And now my next question to you is, because you must have thought about this many times, what do you think the biological mechanisms are that you're proposing here? What's going on?
Well, the one common misperception with the cancer as a parasite notion is that parasites cause cancer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm describing is the nature of cancer. What is cancer? And what I'm saying is cancer is a parasite. It doesn't speak to what causes cancer. Now, as you get deep into the book, we talk about, untreated subthreshold parasitic infections that are rampant in the Western world that could be a occult risk factor for cancer. But those two ideas are totally separate. So the book is all about later in the book. So the book starts out describing how fenbendazole kills parasites. Then I talk about how fenbendazole uses the same mechanisms to kill cancer cells. And, lucky us, cancer cells have the same structural weakness that parasites do. So, and then I talk about why is this information not really well known? And that's kind of an interesting side of the book. But as far as what causes cancer, I really don't speak to that. The cancer as a parasite theory is just that. It's a theory. It's a way to think about it. And the way I came up with it was I was reading a bunch of articles about parasitology and cancer at the same time. And I kept over the months, I would be deep into an article and I would have to go back to the title to determine whether I was reading about cancer or a parasite. And you do that 50 times, eventually the light bulb goes off that we're talking about two things that are very similar. And the fact that an antiparasitic drug is killing cancer cells, it's not, you don't have to be Einstein to make the leap that cancer and parasites share all these different features. Most notably, the elephant in the room is that an antiparasitic drug. The fenbendazole is what I focused on because it's over the counter and cheap and easy to find, and that's what people are self-treating with. But there's a lot of different antiparasitic drugs that have anti-cancer capabilities. So it's not just fenbendazole. So the basic clinical petri dish in vivo animal stuff, all that research has been done. And, a lot of the scientists who endeavor in that field have done all the heavy lifting. And what's missing is the translation to human clinical trials. And this is where the politics come into it. There have been a number of instances where, this wheel keeps getting reinvented, the fenbendazole antiparasitics cure cancer wheel. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. but a scientist will discover what I discovered. Usually they'll be in a research institution, and that has all the institutional capture and regulatory capture and professional risk that these people would endure if they were to say that publish a book like I did. I mean, I'm the only one who could have published this book because I have nothing to lose, which is, I think, what you're getting at before. And
Absolutely.
it's kind of like,
absolutely.
So, and I'm not really captured intellectually or by dogma. To say for an oncologist to say that cancer is a parasite would be heresy. They'd be, laughed out of the arena, because it's so obvious, and because it's so it's a bold statement, but it's true. And what happened was, as I tried to, so the way scientists work is you do hypothesis testing. You try to prove that cancer isn't a parasite, right? You would try to prove that statement to be wrong. Well, I couldn't prove it wrong. And what I'm hoping is that when the book is out, the parasitologists, the bug people, will hook up with the oncologists, the cancer people, and that they will realize that there's a lot of synergy between their two fields. And the really exciting thing is, if you're using parasites as a model for cancer, you can accelerate the development of drugs on parasites. You don't have to test it on humans. So you could have rapid drug development. You could see how the parasite is going to develop resistance to it. And you can anticipate all of these things and tweak your drug and make it more perfect before you ever test it on a human. So the model is very powerful, and some of the details in the book where cancer is a parasite, so that we can, one thing I wanted to really make sure that I talked about today was, if this is, why is it somebody like me discovering this? And it's really not me. This fenbendazole and antiparasitics appear to go through like a 20-year cycle where they're discovered and then they disappear. It seems like they've been suppressed. So as I was going through my research, I was about 95% sure that fenbendazole was the real deal, because I had my mother-in-law who, it cured her. It's not like in-between response. No blood tumor marker normal, no evidence of, no imaging evidence of cancer at all till today. So,
well, Bill,
cancer.
can I just stop you, because, wow, I mean, this is quite a remarkable discovery or connection, let's put it that way, fraught with problems, right. Problems, because if anybody in a research institute that studies cancer would come up with a cure for cancer that is worth $1 or $2, they will be pilloried, run out of research, and will never see the light of day again.
Right.
And I think this is a story that is very easy for the public to miss, but once you become aware of it, difficult to ignore. And I think your scientific background, which clearly you have in order, your neuroscience and PhD background, is clearly well placed to make connections. You mentioned that and I love the fact that you're saying parasites don't cause cancer, and you're not even talking about why that might even be the case. We've covered many reasons in environmental, nutritional medicine. The question is, why don't we all have cancer given what we're exposed to? Not right. Why did I get it? But I'm intrigued by your statement about the structural weaknesses, the similarities between a parasite and a cancer cell, because essentially a cancer cell in the breast is really, instead of breast cells being there, there are cancer cells which don't do the same work as the breast
Right.
cells do, and similarly in the prostate and in lung and gut. They're rogue cells. What's the structural weakness that they have in common?
So the main, if it was a multiple choice test, and you asked on the test what is the main similarity attacked by fenbendazole that cancer and parasite cells share, it would be it attacks the microtubules. So parasite and cancer microtubules share the same structural weakness, where that fenbendazole has a high affinity to bind to both parasite beta tubulin and cancer beta tubulin. So they both share that same genetic weakness. But fenbendazole, that's the main reason. So once you clog the microtubules, which is the skeleton and the transport system of the cell, it dies a number of different ways. It starves to death, it explodes. If a cancer cell has a problem, it will self-destruct through a process called apoptosis, and through oncogenes, P53 being the main oncogene, will be triggered to kill the cell or disabled so that a cancer cell remains active. But the way that so that's just one mechanism that fenben uses to kill cancer cells and parasites, but it has 10 other ways. So some of them are, it'll block glucose uptake. It'll block angiogenesis, the development of new blood vessels. It'll mess around with molecular mimicry so that the fenbendazole prevents a cancer cell from cloaking itself in antigens that protect it from the immune system. Essentially, it becomes invisible. So fenbendazole destroys that. It also disrupts the tumor microenvironment, which a tumor is a heterogeneous group of cells. And what it does, as it forms the tumor, it will create what's known as a stroma, which is more or less like a force field of cells that keep material, and it's a protective coating that protects the cancer cells inside, specifically, especially important in pancreatic tumors. So fenbendazole blows that apart. It destroys the stroma.
Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health Advisory Panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below, or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you.
It also will disrupt the drug efflux pumps on the surface of the cell. So cancer cells and parasites have defense mechanisms to protect them from outside agents that might disrupt them. So let's say you infuse a toxic substance, a cancer drug or an antiparasitic, next to a parasite cell or cancer cell or vice versa. It has a defense mechanism called drug efflux pump, glycoprotein pump, if you're interested in that. Excuse me. But as the substance is being passively diffused into the cell. These pumps pump it out, kind of like a leaking boat with a bilge pump. Antiparasitics disrupt that process as well. So there's a number of different ways that fenbendazole can kill the cancer cell. The reason why you have no side effects with fenbendazole is because the cancer cell or the parasite has 100 times greater affinity for the drug than do healthy cells. So you don't get any side effects. So, and the beauty of fenbendazole is that you take it by mouth, it goes through the circulatory system and binds like a magnet to the cancer cell, finds it and destroys it. And the reason why it's so effective is like I said before, it doesn't just kill the cell one way. Like if the cancer cell is mutating and it becomes less sensitive to the microtubule effect, it's got 9 other ways that fenbendazole is going to kill it. So it completely wipes out the whole tumor. So because of its affinity for the cancer cell and its multiple redundant mechanisms to kill the cell, there's none left to become drug resistant because they're all killed the first time through. Whereas with traditional chemotherapy, what happens there is it will kill the cells that are vulnerable, but leave the cells that aren't. And those are known as cancer stem cells. And those are the cells that metastasize and eventually kill the patient because there's no treatment by definition. Fenbendazole has been shown in many labs to kill those stem cells. So after they've developed from traditional treatment like vincristine, the taxane, Taxols, standard of care chemotherapy, if you come in and give the animal fenbendazole, it kills those metastasized stem cells. So I have a chapter in the book. How come the people in my case reports, how did they survive after going through all the chemo? So the one thing you should realize, so I've got 20 case reports, including my mother-in-law. And most of the people, my mother-in-law is one of the outliers who did no other treatment other than fenbendazole. But many people, you did fenbendazole as a last resort. They had gone through chemo, radiation, and you just can't do that forever. You kind of reach the end point and the doctor says, that's it, get your affairs in order. Sorry, we did everything we could for you. That's when most of the people in the case report started fenben and lived to tell about it with no side effects. So the case reports are proof positive that this works in humans. The animal research, the preclinical Petri dish research suggests that this would be a powerful anti-cancer drug. The human case reports prove it. So do you really need to do human clinical trial and with no side effects? So yes. It's almost too good to be true. So I started before to tell you when I was doing this book, I was 95% sure that fenbendazole was the real deal. But being a scientist, you always have to see that there could be an uncontrolled artifact that is influencing all these successful case reports, some uncontrolled variable. And as a course of doing my research, when I came across this word in a published paper in 1975, oncodissolve. Oncodissolve. Okay. ONCO, which means tumor, dissolve. This is fenbendazole, renamed as a cancer drug in 1976. Pharma knew about fenbendazole as a cure for cancer, and here's the paper. In 1976, so they named it oncodissolve. So as a scientist, as a nerd, I can tell you exactly what happened. So this was done in Belgium. scientists were experimenting with a molecule, an antiparasitic molecule, antiparasite molecule that was off patent since 1961. They found that, it disrupted the microtubules in rat brain tumors. And they're just not going to do one paper. They're going to do many things in parallel. They're going to be testing it in animals. They're going to give it to their friends who have cancer. They're going to have all types of parallel experiments going. And by the time this paper comes out, they're going to know whether they have a real cure for cancer. And they did. Two reasons. One, to name it 𝐀𝐻𝐿 tells you what its function is. When I saw that word, I knew fenbendazole is a cure for cancer, and pharma knew about it. In 1976, I go through the book and I show how I prove that it was suppressed. Would you like to know how I did that?
Bill, would I like to know? Yes, I would, and I'm sure my listeners would too.
Okay. So remember I said that every 20 years or so, fenbendazole is rediscovered, that wheel is rediscovered, that this cures cancer. So in 2002, there was a paper, they looked at mebendazole, but again, it's a functional equivalent for fenbendazole. And this was at the University of Texas in conjunction with MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is a big cancer center here. So they did all the experiments that you would want to do to prove that mebendazole is a cure for cancer in animals. So they showed that at very low physiological doses, it killed cancer cells, all different types of human cancer cells in the petri dish, breast, ovarian, prostate, lung cancer, brain, glioblastoma. So all different types of human cancers it killed at nanomolar concentrations. Then they implanted the tumors into rats. Killed them, didn't kill the rats were fine. So they published this paper that said, hey, we've discovered that this novel microtubule disruptor known as mebendazole is a cure for cancer in 2002. So they said that it was novel 3 or 4 times. And if you go through the references of that paper, they don't cite this 1976 paper because it would be unscholarly not to if they had known about it. So the 2002 paper by an Indian, his name's hard to pronounce, but I'll butcher it, Murkopathy, 2002 in clinical oncology. It was a very high-level journal. So the researchers didn't know about 𝐀𝐻𝐿 being a cure for cancer from the 1976 paper. The peer reviewers who were supposed to be the oncological experts didn't know about it. And none of the readers of the paper knew about it either, because someone would have said, hey, wait a minute. What about that 1976 paper that found that mebendazole derivative is a cure for cancer? They renamed it 𝐀𝐻𝐿. So the paper was suppressed. So what happened? How did this paper get suppressed? Well, it's from 1976. 1976, all journals were on paper in the stacks in medical libraries. So you had to have a physical copy of the journal. What happened in 2002? Well, that was kind of the transition from paper to digital. Like the internet for science was, there were some resources, but things were still being indexed and cataloged. In 2025, when I found the paper, everything was digitized. In this paper is actually, these are photographs. They're not actually keyed in. It's a photograph of the actual paper. You'll see some of those in some of the old journals. So between 2002 and 2025, a complete set of biochemical and biophysical research communications was indexed for the internet. And that's how I found it. So in 2002, for the Merck-Kapathy paper, this paper, for whatever reason, was not available. It was suppressed.
God.
By 2025, it was available because it was somebody indexed the whole journal like they should. There was no reason not to. So I don't know where this paper went in 2002. My guess is it's only a 4 or 5 page paper. It was probably ripped out of a lot of the journals in medical libraries. So if someone were to actually do the legwork, they might find that these pages are missing. So anyway, so it's kind of like a spy novel that we have here. But the
Yes,
word
well, yeah,
oncodisol kind of tells you all you need to know. They know.
yeah.
They knew
And
what it did.
and is that article in 1976 available now?
Yeah.
How would anyone find it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is the actual article. My daughter is affiliated with a university. I had to have her print it out for me, but it's available. I mean, I don't think you can suppress it now. I actually published. In the book, it's so unbelievable. I published this page. I bought the copyright for it so that I would have a financial paper trail in case this did disappear. So Academic Press, I paid them to be able to publish this in the book. So we have a financial paper trail. So anyway, so it's kind of became like this, this substance cures cancer. And why doesn't my doctor know about it? Well, your doctor doesn't know about it because he's been duped like everyone else. It's been suppressed. And doctors, if they knew about the power of fenbendazole, they would certainly give it to their patients. And it doesn't mean that it's a binary choice. You have to choose traditional or fenbendazole. You can do both. And it's whatever people want to do is fine. Everybody has their own life to save. And if you want to go a traditional route, that's fine. If you want to go non-traditional, that's fine. But, the rational thing is to go both, cover your bases. And, eventually what will happen, which should happen, is people will say, gee, my traditional treatment has all these side effects and it's very high risk and, low reward. Cytotoxic. And, maybe I just want to go with the fenben and ivermectin and mebendazole. So we're kind of at a transition here where this word tells you all you need to know. Pharma knows that.
But Bill, let me just ask this. I mean, I was going to ask you, and I think we've already answered this. What level of evidence do you think would be necessary before such an approach should be widely adopted? And you already mentioned the terrible word that won a Nobel Prize in medicine for humans, ivermectin, which is another cheap, effective, safe antiviral. So we've already had the experience. And I would think any doctor listening to this would be shuddering. Well, there's two responses. One is to say, I must try this. My patient's health is at risk, is at stake here. And the other one would be, if I try this, I may get deregistered, like a lot of doctors did who had the courage to use something that was effective and cheap, but not recognized by regulatory bodies.
Right.
I mean, this story is not new. Ivermectin is a good example of that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think what your listeners need to realize is that when doctors get cancer, they use fenbendazole. So, and I know that because they're subscribers to my Substack, and they write in, thank you for turning me on to fenbendazole. It saved my life. So doctors know about it. Doctors it's not standard of care, so their hands are tied, but they will know about it after this book is out, and it'll be up to them to push. To push for quick clinical trials to determine the optimal dosage, the optimal cofactors that enhance absorption, and the optimal protocol. Because I think all the legwork has been done by the basic scientists who have shown the causal mechanism, the lack of side effects, and what the case reports have done is more or less done clinical trials showing efficacy. Now, one more thing that's going to blow your mind. Do you have enough time to hear this?
Oh, well, Bill, please continue.
Okay. So the number one question that I get on my Substack is, if this cures cancer, will it prevent it? It's kind of a chicken or egg issue, but it's very hard to scientifically prove a preventative agent because you can't prove a negative. Like, you would never know whether you would have gotten cancer or not if you're taking, ground up eggshells or eating crayons or whatever it is. So it's kind of a logical inconsistency. But what if we had a experiment in nature that was already running on a huge scale that answered that question for us? And we do. So
okay.
This is what's so exciting. I mean, I get chills talking about this. This is my favorite.
I'm getting chills listening to you, and I'm guessing we're moving towards another book here.
No, this is in the book. So
it's in your book. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So again, we're talking about antiparasitics, and we're talking about fenbendazole, albendazole, and flubendazole. These drugs are used to control parasites on a massive scale in 123 countries around the world. There are 62 countries that don't use them. They're the wealthier Western countries because there's this myth that we're clean, we don't have parasites, and we have nothing to worry about. The developing countries administer these drugs, most notably albendazole, which is a direct analog of fenbendazole, to their populations twice a year to manage parasitic infections. They have, as a group, 1/2 the rate of cancer that the developed countries that don't use antiparasitics do. 1/2. And you're in Australia? So I'll give you an example. So in Australia, according to the WHO, all these data are not hard to find. Anybody with an internet connection can find them. The WHO Global Cancer Incidence data. In Canada, it's about 400 per 100,000. You guys don't have mass drug administration for for parasite control. In a place like India, which does, the cancer incidence rate is 98. So it's 4 times greater in Australia versus India. In the US, it's 3 times greater than India. Now, when you look at all the countries around the world that use antiparasitics, it's Mexico, India, most places in Africa. They're so different genetically, culturally, diet, environment. The only common feature is the population-wide use of antiparasitics, and the fact that it's such a dramatic effect. You're not even targeting people at risk. You're giving it to children and adults who are at risk for parasitic infection, not for cancer. Imagine if they were targeting older people with antiparasitics, what the rate would be. So the chapter in my book is an unexplained global disparity in cancer incidence explained. So the differential use of antiparasitic drugs in countries that deworm the population prevents cancer. The elephant in the room is that the countries that don't use dewormers, the rich Western countries, have twice the incidence of cancer. They also have 4 times the per capita income. So the rich countries don't use antiparasitics, and we have all types of cancer. Now, you can put 2 and 2 together. You can see where I'm going with this. That so what is the U.S., is Australia? Are we free of parasites? No. The CDC recently did a series of alarming articles that really got no play, but they're in the book, basically saying that the rich, wealthy countries, including the U.S., are whistling through the graveyard if we think that we're not infested with parasites. So one article talks about toxoplasmosis, which you get from cats. They estimate that in the U.S. alone, there's 60 million people who are chronically infected with this parasite. And that's a lot of people. And the problem with that, so the problem with being infested with a parasite is it causes inflammation. Untreated inflammation is a major cause of cancer. So when you were getting at what causes cancer, the parasite theory, it's not that parasites cause cancer as the way that most people think about it. They could, as a risk factor. Untreated parasitic infections could cause cancer through inflammation, through uncontrolled inflammation. So you're dealing with kind of like a straw that breaks the camel's back model, where you may have genetic risk factors, and then you add on a uncontrolled, subthreshold, untreated parasitic infection. Now you could develop cancer. So that, to me, that's another nail in the coffin of pharma. That why don't we treat in the West? Why don't we treat for parasitic infections? Because we treat for which affect everyone. Why are we so fanatical about vaccinations for a sporadic seasonal flu that only some people get, yet everybody's infected with parasites? You manage a parasitic infection. Anybody who has an animal, a pet, we treat our dogs and cats periodically, maybe 2-3 times a year. We deworm them, yet people kiss them on the mouth. It's a parasite. It's an egg. It's a parasitic egg transfer behavior.
Yeah,
we get infected by the same thing. So we're infected with parasites. We have to admit it, and all we have to do is start taking antiparasitic drugs, and we'll prevent cancer at the same time.
Now listen. I mean, this is mind-boggling. It's fantastic to hear this story, and it's not it's taken it to a whole other level. I mean, we've done many stories about the influence of big pharma and big food on public health, but with millions, literally hundreds of millions of people that have died since 1976, and everybody listening to this, including myself, and I'm sure you would know many people who have died. It's a shocking fact. Let's finish now. Just listen. I know you're writing another book that's coming out in June about sunlight, and that's a favorite topic of ours. And I think we will definitely get you back to discuss that. But I just want to, I want to leave our listener now, and they're obviously going to have to read your book, and we'll have links to that. But what advice would you leave our listener with, who A, would want to prevent, and B, if they had a diagnosis, what would be the protocol for taking this incredibly safe and cheap drug?
Well, obviously I'm not a physician, so I don't actually recommend.
Well, that's a caveat. We make that right statement in our podcast, so no one is going to hold us accountable here. This is your personal opinion.
Right. So there's 21 different case reports in the book, And on the Substack, there's more case reports on the Substack. So what I encourage people to do is go to your cancer, go to your diagnosis. So if you have, renal cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, NRAS mutated melanoma, there's a bunch of them there. Find your cancer and then see what the person did. Monkey see, monkey do. See how much they took. It doesn't mean that it's the ideal amount to take or that what they did is what you want to do, but take a look at what they did, see what's right for you. The common theme for all the case reports is the presence or absence of fenbendazole. And that doesn't mean that down the road there's not going to be, somebody else write a book about mebendazole or, some other ivermectin. I mean, that's going to be coming soon. Ivermectin has different mechanisms. But just to go back to what's happening in the background. So I don't know if you could see my book and then this book. See the real Anthony Fauci here?
Oh, yes. No,
Okay.
we'll be doing a story on that. Yep.
Right. So that's Health and Human Services Secretary Kennedy's book. The publisher of this book is the publisher of this book.
Yep.
The government knows about fenbendazole. So we're very hopeful that things are going to happen quickly. And, Big Pharma can make just as much money helping people live from cancer than die a slow, painful death. So what I'm asking is that they rethink, factor in something like fenbendazole into their treatment models and cure people. People should live, not die. And they should have they should die of old age, like hopefully my mother-in-law will. And the best thing you can do once you learn about fenbendazole and you read the book, you read the Substack, is when you encounter someone who has cancer, to just tell them about it. Let them do their own research. It's not going to be right for everybody, but it will be right for someone. And when you help save that person, it's a unbelievable feeling. And then you're motivated to go out and do it more. So there are people who have benefited from the Substack who are out there like apostles spreading the word on fenbendazole, and they're everywhere. So it's really a miraculous word of mouth thing. And the beauty of fenbendazole is you can buy it on Amazon. They sell it in 50-pound bags. They dump it on cattle feed. So it's so inexpensive. So people get worried about, am I taking too much? Am I not? You just have to take some. And it would be nice to know what the ideal dose is. The minimum dose is 222 milligrams. That's been the smallest dose. The largest dose that are in our case reports is 2,000 milligrams per day. So, that's kind of the range. So that's a big range. But I have no idea, I don't know what the optimal dose is. For my mother-in-law, she used 222 and, eradicated it. And so leave it to people smarter than us to figure out what the ideal dose is.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for sharing this with us. It's an extraordinary story, and we will of course have links to that book and to the Substack. But thank you for sharing your journey, your knowledge, and it's not a discovery, but putting it all together and sharing it with us today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I think this story highlights some of the problems in medicine, and that is that if you are a researcher, and let's face it, there are so many PhDs out there in the world now who have made their careers medical research, well, you go looking for research money or funding to find a definitive cure for a chronic disease, one that provides a cure. well, I think you will actually have trouble finding that money because the return on investment for whoever gives you that money is not there. Chronic disease management with expensive patented drugs is what the healthcare system is about. And having someone like William, who is a neuroscientist, who has done his PhD, understands scientific research, but comes at it from an open mind and free of conflict of interest. In fact, quite the opposite. The conflict of interest for William was to find a solution to a problem. And he did that has done that with an open mind. Well, is it a solution? Well, it's certainly promising and it's certainly empowering and it's certainly cheap. And if William's research bears it out, it is also very effective. And the rationale behind it, I think, is also very interesting. So much of research now is looking at all these diseases as a metabolic disease. And we've done some programs on a ketogenic diet being a way of approaching cancer, because every researcher, every clinician knows that cancer loves glucose. That's exactly what a PET scan is. You want to find out if cancer has extended through your body. Well, you inject radioactive glucose because research knows that cancer cells love glucose. So ketogenic diets are one way of reducing the food available to cancer cells. But this is a whole new way of looking at it. Now, we will have links to William's book, Cancer is a Parasite, and exploring the repurposed drug, which he refers to in his in this podcast. So again, you will have links to that in the show notes. I'd encourage you to join the Unstress Health community. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well.
Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life. Join the Unstress Health community and transform stress into strength. Build mental fitness. From self-sabotage to self-mastery. And together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Expert-led courses, curated podcasts, like-minded community and support, and much more. Visit unstresshealth.com today. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.